Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and it is Friday, the 28th of March, and we are starting this morning with stormwater. And we'll welcome our legislative council, Mr. Grady. Welcome.
Morning, this is Mr. Grady with the Senate Council. You just give me file up, if you don't mind. So I'll be walking you through page 481 and activating stormwater management as it passed the House. So there is first section, section 1, it's amending the stormwater section in Title 10. This is really where most, if not all, of the stormwater requirements in statute are located. The first change is under the exemptions from permitting on line page 1, lines 16, 21. But before you read that, let's read the lead-in language. It's no permit is required under subdivision C1, which is an operating permit, C5, and an operating permit, or C7, which is a 3-acre of this section for which the municipality has assumed full legal responsibility as part of a permit issued to the municipality by the secretary. And so this language, the change on page 1, line 16, 21 says, notwithstanding the provisions of 24 VSA 3254, that's how you do special assessments, which currently require a vote of the majority of the municipality or a vote of the majority of those to be assessed. When a municipality assumes full legal responsibility for a stormwater system, the municipality may assess municipal impact fees on users of the stormwater system, provided that a majority of the property owners subject to the impact fee consented, and the impact fee assessed is a fair portion to the user of the cost of the improvement in accordance with the benefit of the benefits the user received. So this is to facilitate the use of municipal impact fees instead of having to go to a full town vote, or the way that the other option is interpreted by some is that everyone has to agree. This is just a majority of those that are to be assessed by the municipality that assumes full legal responsibility. So if there are any questions with that, I'm moving on to page 2. And still in 1264, the stormwater stormwater section on page 2, lines. Really, this entire page is the requirement that the Secretary of Natural Resources establish a schedule for implementation of the 3-acre general permit. Everyone know what the 3-acre general permit is?
I take a review.
Okay. During the development of the Clean Water Initiative Act 64 for the purposes of meeting TMDLs and Champlain and Metro Magog and addressing other water quality issues around the state, there was a state permit that was adopted or enacted in legislation that required any parcel that had 3 acres or more of impervious surface that had never been permitted for stormwater or is permitted under a pre-2002 stormwater management manual. That parcel would be a new permit, and the permit effectively would require redevelopment, enhancement, compliance with the current standards for management of stormwater. And there was a schedule that was required in Act 64, and you will see page 2 for impervious surface located within the Lake Champlain watershed, and for Magog watershed or the watershed of stormwater impaired water. Persons were required to it says be permitted by October 1, 2028, but the agency has, or 2023, but the agency interpreted that to to basically provide notice that they were going to avail themselves of the general permit and meet the requirements of the general permit. That has been pushed out from 2023 to 2028. To give those who didn't avail themselves still need to come into compliance with the permit additional time, and you will see later additional access to resources. On page 3, you'll see that the schedule for those parcels subject to the 3-acre permit outside of Champlain and Omega, their schedule is being to under Act 64 as they would have needed to come into compliance by 2033. This is pushing it out until 2038, or not later than 5 years after a binding stormwater specific waste load allocation has been established for that watershed, whichever occurs first. So they get an additional 5 years, or if for some reason a stormwater specific allocation, maybe there's a stormwater impaired water in their watershed, maybe a new TMDL comes out that has a stormwater specific waste load allocation, they would need to come into compliance with the 3-acre permit at that time.
Yes, questions, yes.
See, just 2 quick ones, I hope. For the watershed, stormwater impaired water, that includes the Connecticut River Valley.
The Connecticut River right now is not stormwater impaired, it is impaired for nitrogen. If you don't know yet whether or not the waste load allocation would have a stormwater specific load allocation. So think of it like this. Remember when you did the Lake Champlain TMDL, you designated sectors, and some of those sectors were point sources. It's like straight out of a wastewater treatment plant. Some of them were stormwater off the developed lands. And so there was a stormwater specific load allocated underneath that TMDL. Because the phase of the Long Island Sound TMDL has not been rolled out yet for the Connecticut, it's possible that that phase has a stormwater specific, a stormwater allocation in it. And if it did, then those 3-acre parcels in the Connecticut would have 5 years in order to come into compliance with the 3-acre permit.
How long has Vermont required stormwater permits?
I think technically 1978 was the first.
Okay, so it came out of clean water.
And that was the first Clean Water Act requirement, and then I think Vermont was very soon thereafter in the 80s was the first actual permit issued, I think.
Okay,
So
thank you.
moving down on page 3 to line 17, section 2. This relates to the clean water surcharge on the property transfer tax. I think you all know what the property transfer tax is. There's also a surcharge that's on it that currently pays for both clean water and for debt service on the housing bond that was issued in 2017, 2018. It was intended to repeal, or really not totally repeal, but to repeal the clean water portion of that in 2027 and leave the debt relief portion until 2039. Is it? 20. But what is being 2039? But what is being proposed is to not sunset the clean water surcharge at all, and to leave it in place as it is, which would be a 0.22% surcharge on the value of any property subject to the property transfer tax. And the property subject to the property transfer tax essentially over $200,000 of your primary residence, or over $250,000 in primary residence if you finance it in specific ways, but also effectively any other property value that is transferred. So that is a significant portion of the Clean Water Fund, that clean water surcharge. Of its annual revenue, and the agency has requested that the sunset be repealed because they believe that that revenue is going to be needed to meet the clean water initiative going into the future. Doesn't mean you can't sunset it or amend it at some future time if you.
When all the water is clean.
Yeah. Let's go ahead with 20.
On page 4, you'll see sections 3 and 4. These are conforming amendments when the housing bond was passed and the surcharge was amended. There was a lot of purpose and intent language and findings and multiple effective date sections. And so I had to go in and make conforming changes to all of those so there wasn't any conflict. That will lead to an interpretation of the surcharge was sunset. So that's what you see in sections 3, 4, and 5, those conforming changes. And that allows you to go to page 6, section 6. When Senator Chittenden introduced his bill S-24, part of it had a new special fund that would provide funding for local implementation of stormwater permitting requirements, including the 3-acre. And in discussions, and there was a similar provision that was looked at in the House, but in discussions with the agency, the House Environment Committee decided not to create a new special fund, but to amend 2 existing grant programs that provide assistance for stormwater permitting. And the first thing that they proposed to do is to no longer limit them to grants, to allow the agency to have flexibility in the type of financial assistance that they would provide for these programs. The first program is the Development and Implementation Program. It provides financial assistance to pretty much any person who's required to obtain a regulatory requirement or permit related to water quality standards. And it would provide funding for projects relating to permitting for pervious surface of 3 acres or more, and for permit renewal for discharge to a stormwater impaired water under an individual permit or a general permit that did not incorporate the requirements of the 2002 stormwater management amendment. So 3 acre. So this is, you can now apply to the agency for 3 acre assistance. One of the limiting factors in this program previously is that it was only available where a clean water service provider for that watershed had met its annual goals. They're not meeting their annual goals in every watershed. So this program is just not available. Or the agency had to massage whether or not they were meeting their goals. And so now you're just taking away, this is a program to help those people, any property owners subject to the water quality permitting, get financial assistance to meet those requirements.
Yes, ma'am. The 2002 Stormwater Management Manual. Is that the document that lays out the 3 acre rule?
No, that's the threshold. If you were unpermitted or did not incorporate the requirements of the management manual pre-2000 or post-2002, then you had to get the 3 acre permit.
Okay, because the 3 acre permit came in during the 2016 big clean water all-in thing.
Right, and now when you get your 3 acre permit, you have to comply with the existing stormwater management manual, which is in 2019, 17.
So are there people who are pre-2002 that are essentially grandfathered that don't have to do something?
if they're under 3 acres.
If they're under 3 acres, okay.
And that's one of the ways you can deal with the 3 acre permit. Reduce your impervious surface, so
Yeah.
you no longer have.
Take out that driveway.
Yes.
So a similar question, so up in the, part of the language that's underlined there, line 16, under subdivision 1264 H2, and we've got 1264 G3 prior to that, can you just help me, know what those references are?
The G3 is, if you go back to page 2. That is the schedule for adoption of the 3 acre general permit.
Okay.
And then 12H2. You do not see in here, but there's a provision related to stormwater impaired waters needing to meet similar standards as the impaired waters in Champlain and Memphremagog. And so that is what that relates to.
Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm thinking of a specific issue in my district in Rutland, and the town has a flow reduction plan that was recommended that they implement, and it never got implemented. So everybody downstream of this, I think it's New York, which is an impaired waterway, is on the list, one of them being the Rutland, the Vermont State Fairgrounds. So because the city didn't do, and they weren't mandated, from what I was told, to implement that plan, everything downstream from them is affected. Is there any way that everybody upstream could get some relief to implement that plan?
Well, yeah, I think this program would be available to those who would need a stormwater permit for impervious surface in that watershed.
Okay,
Because it is a stormwater impaired watershed. But you said a lot of things there that are. So yeah, there were flow reduction plans. They were going to be implemented in individual stormwater TMDLs, but then the state took the tack of allowing those communities with impaired water, stormwater impaired waters, to include them under their MS4 permits. And then to address them as part of their MS4 permit, which from the last time I looked at an MS4 permit had a flow control provision. And so there are requirements in that stormwater impaired water, whether they're being implemented, I don't know enough about the specific situation to say that.
everything that I'm talking about is affected by this impaired waterway, and they're downstream of
Right.
the problem. So then they have 3 acres, but you know, these are businesses that people purchased within the last 7 or 8 years. That, you know, I won't say they never said they didn't know about this requirement, but it's putting an awful burden on businesses in that watershed. So I know they did apply for a permit. I guess the agency had $49,999 they could apply for the permit application fee.
It sounds like you're talking about the 3 acre permit.
Yes,
Yeah, and there was money available to
Yep.
do the pre-site engineering, pre-engineering. Yes, and that money was there, and this is now gonna be a source of funds to help property owners comply with that.
right. So if they hire an engineer, and the engineer says that, you know, there's nothing we can do because there's no place to put the water. Unless we control what's coming in from upstream.
Well, there are options underneath the manual to do that. including paying a fee. And one of the things that was discussed in the House, it's not in this bill that you might want to discuss. Is capping that fee, or if certain standards are met, not assessing the impact fee. So that the cost doesn't multiply because of your site limitations and your inability to do what's under the manual.
That's, I guess that's what I was looking for, is there's another option for these people.
I think I would encourage you to talk to A&R about what they had previously discussed. It might be a little complicated. I think that's what House Environment at that point where they were in their discussion of the bill basically said. We don't have enough time.
So are we building in time into this plan? So they have more time?
Well, I didn't time legislative time. They were nearing the crossover date and
Oh, okay.
they didn't have time to do that. But I won't comment on how long the session is gonna last.
Don't ruin my weekend. Anyway, thank you. It's a complicated question, but I think I heard what I seen here.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay,
On page 7, you got that second financial assistance program that's being amended. No longer going to be limited to grants, no longer limited only in those watersheds where the clean water service provider is meeting its annual goals. And it's available to municipalities, and it's available to municipalities right now for more than 3 acres. It's available to them to meet their municipal roads general permit or their MS4 permits or other stormwater operating permits, including the 3 acre. And it would be available to municipalities to comply with 3 acre when the municipality assumes full legal responsibility for stormwater system, as you saw in the first section of the bill.
this question.
Just to make sure I understand this, both in the previous on page 6 and 7, we're not calling it grants, and yet it's kind of grants.
Well,
So is it just that it's just that you don't have to apply in the same way, or what's the?
no, there's the agency and Neil, the deputy commissioner, probably the best person to talk to, as he has a ton of experience doing financing at the agency, but they have multiple tools that they can use. Subsidies, grants, loans, low interest loans, no cash loans.
Okay. That's good, thank you.
So they already have that, so this is more just truing up the language with what they already do?
So they don't do it currently underneath these programs
Okay.
because these are limited as grants.
Mhm.
But at the agency, they have in their various programs. You know, clean water revolving funds, they have loans and loans, and they will probably look to do similar things here.
Okay, great.
Page 7, line 18, section 7, this is in the Clean Water Fund. The Clean Water Fund, does everybody know how that works? It's not like a traditional fund where there's money in it and there's somebody that appropriate or gives out money to recipients. The Clean Water Fund has a Clean Water Board, and that board recommends to the governor how the money in the Clean Water Fund should be spent in the next fiscal year. And then the governor presents that as part of her budget to the General Assembly. And the General Assembly then determines how to appropriate the money out of the Clean Water Fund for the next fiscal year. In setting up the structure, the General Assembly directed the Clean Water Board to have 3 priorities. And they're called the tiered priorities, even though the word tier is not used in the statutes at all.
Somebody's here.
So,
The water's salty.
but page 8 is the first tier, those first priorities. That's not changing in page 481. What is changing is the second tier, which begins on page 8 and goes on to page 9. And you'll see for that existing program, the municipal stormwater implementation program, page 4881 would require at least $1 million annually for the cost of complying with permitting requirements under subdivision 1264C7. 1264C7 is a 3-acre permit. So $1 million annually is going to be pushed through this program for 3-acre relief.
So is there a fiscal note with this bill
There is.
that explains all how
Yeah.
much money's in the fund
Yeah.
and all that?
So it because of that structure, the Clean Water Fund. And how all of its implications are next fiscal year. It doesn't have a fiscal year. This language doesn't have a fiscal year 26 impact.
Right. So then this money won't be available till FY 27.
So
So in a way, this is obligating a future legislature.
yes, but it doesn't obligate them because again, the way that that whole structure works, right? You cannot withstand the language next fiscal year if you want to.
So it's putting the intent out there.
Yes. And part of that further that intent is on page 10.
Yeah, sure. Go.
I'm just maybe being big about this, but, the $1 million is for municipalities to do work on municipal properties, or is the,
It could be for municipal, it could be for those where they assume responsibility for residential subdivision.
okay,
But it's not for,
It's not in the
Individual
it's not in the developed lands program, which is on the bottom of page 9. Now, you could put a minimum level of funding that goes into there if you wanted to.
The developed plans.
For the development, and it's not available to anyone.
And this is not necessarily new money, this is just dedicating money that was there.
Right.
Right.
And this is not the first time you've said in these clean water fund priorities that there has to be at least or it shall not exceed. You can see that type of language on page 8. Funding for basin planning shall be at least $500,000. Funding for the water quality enhancement grant shall not exceed $5 million in a fiscal year. So this is not the first time you've gotten to that level of direction for clean water fund.
Okay.
Page 10. Line 1, section 8. There's a recommended appropriation, because how the clean water fund works. There's a recommended $5 million from the Clean Water Fund fiscal year 2027, the municipal stormwater implementation program, the cost of compliance with the 1264C7, the 3-acre. So effectively, that would capitalize that program with that $5 million in FY 27. And then going forward, it would have to include at least $1 million in, so that would be an ongoing financial assistance program for compliance with 3 acres.
Any of that line on, or that reference on line 6 is, that's the 3 acres.
Yeah, that's 3 acres.
Perfect. Great.
So now you're moving out of the clean water fund on page 10, line 8, section 9. Last year, when you were looking at how municipalities set rates for water, sewer, stormwater, etc., you amended one of the authorities for a municipality to set rates based on an equivalent residential unit of impervious surface on property. And when you did, you said that they needed to set that rate based on the average area of impervious surface. Well, it turns out many, if not most, of the utilities that do this base it on the median area of impervious surface. And unless you change this, they would technically be required to they would amend their ordinances and have to go back before their municipal bodies to get approval for their new rate structure, which they don't want to do. And so this, by saying average or median, allows those that have already set by median to continue with their existing rate structure.
So you don't think this would create confusion because it's permissive, it allows them to do either. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
People,
I think that's the question, yeah.
Them is.
municipality.
Okay.
So you can see that this section 9 relates to the ability of the municipal corporation through its board or whatever oversight authority to set rates, rents, or charges may be based upon. So it's permissive and it's the municipality providing those services for groundwater, surface, or stormwater.
This doesn't affect stormwater utilities.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does.
Okay, great.
This is. I mean, you can make an argument that their authority to assess rates is drawn from a couple of different places, but this is a very specific authority related to that. And you would want to be clear that they have that authority to set based on median.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Page 11, line 11, the House Environment Committee had discussions about how, especially in relation to 3 acre, but generally with water quality permitting requirements, that there are some municipalities that are very good at it. Some municipalities that have the resources or the staff or the expertise that can do it very well. And consequently have capacity to help property owners or residential owners in their municipality, but there are others that do not. And or have a will that blames you, the legislature, and wants to be left out of it. And so the House Committee was looking at ways to make implementation more equitable, more efficient, more cost effective for all tenants. And one of the things that was discussed was having regional stormwater utilities, which you can already do now under the state law, but it requires entering intermunicipal agreements, coming up with charters, having charters approved. What most of your municipalities have done for solid waste management entities. It would be a similar, form and function, but for a different purpose. So the committee upstairs in the House wants to look at that and create a study committee to determine how to form and the benefit of forming regional stormwater utilities. And that's what you'll see page 11, line 11, section 10, creation of the committee.
Love that.
Pardon?
We have a colleague who will love that.
I think I met with that.
Yes.
I think it might be a little bit harder to form than she might want them to form. But this committee will
They
look.
will study it.
They will look at the
Yeah.
feasibility and benefit of creating this regional stormwater utility districts to facilitate implementation and compliance with water quality laws. It's got the commissioner of DEC or designate representative of the league. a representative of an MS4 town, a representative of a small town, a representative of the Green Mountain Water Environment Association, commercial and industrial business owners, subject to 3 acre representative of the environmental advocacy organization. Their powers are to review the feasibility of establishing regional stormwater utilities, looking at the current statutory authority of how to form, including any potential disincentives in that authority or obstacles to utility formation. An approach the city could use for implementing a regional stormwater utility that would allow utilities to assume liability for compliance with water quality laws, including securing permitting permits for 3 acres or achieving the phosphorus reduction targets. Review and recommend cost-effective and equitable approaches with reasonable level raising and distribution of project funding, consideration of prior revenue raising, recommendations made in the 2017 Clean Water Report. The treasurer did look at this and went into it, but if you can find the treasurer's report, good luck. But I have a copy of it if this committee needs it. It's not online anymore. And recommend whether and how to authorize a regional stormwater utility to assess fees or charges for all landowners, residents, and businesses. Propose how a regional stormwater utility district to be eligible for clean water state revolving loan fund awards and access state level financial assistance. For stormwater systems.
This report was 2017, close to 2019. I remember sitting in the House chamber and getting a briefing from the treasurer, and I wasn't here in 2014.
Act 64, 2016, report 2017, at the end of 2017, were you here in 2018?
No. Here in 2019, started in 2019, but I remember some briefing from her.
Oh, she definitely was involved in that entire period of proposing how to do different funding alternatives, estimating the total cost to the state. She came up, I think, with the first
The property transfer tax came in 2019 though, right?
no. Money, that has to go back to month.
I think we may have some more answers to this, on this, particularly from one of our fallen witnesses.
It's like pre-COVID, so everything is.
So I have one question though about the makeup of the committee. I'm a little distracted by the fact that it doesn't look like there is necessarily anyone on this committee from a municipality that has a stormwater utility.
But that's not determined yet.
Right, like.
It's not required. They could be an MS4 community,
Right.
which might have a stormwater utility.
Anyway, it just seems to me that as far as holding some expertise in how it functions, it's something we want to consider. I'm just flagging it as an idea.
We can change it.
Yeah, well, anyway, we can make a note, we can come back to that.
Sure. They will give you their report on page 14, line 13, January 15, 2027. It's not coming back next year, so they're gonna need time. They're gonna be assisted by DEC. And that's really the bill. Effective date is July 1, 2025. With the caveat that their effective dates fill into the substance of some of the other sections, such as the
This is probably not a question for right now, but I'm just thinking ahead to appropriations in section 8. Is a recommended appropriation, but it's not till 2027, so it seems like the kind of thing that appropriations would not taken.
the House, they made me change a word so that they could keep the section in the bill. So, because they've started talking a language based on some accounting system. And so they true up with what is the Department of Finance and Administration doing. And I don't quite speak that language yet. And so they may be changing one word to direct 5 million in, like, you can't use direct because that is too definitive. Had to be recognized.
Interesting. Okay. That's all, thank you. All right. Okay, so we are running a little bit ahead of schedule. Do we have Emily?
Yes.
Oh, hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, are
Thanks for
you,
having
do you
me.
want a minute? Do you, are you
I
ready?
just need to get my computer set up, but
Okay,
happy to jump right in.
okay, great.
Just waking up.
You're just waking up with your computer.
Hopefully the computer, I hope I'm already awake, but we'll see.
Wow. And you're with DEC, well
Yes,
done.
thank you for having me. For the record, my name is Emily Bird. I'm the Clean Water Initiative Program Manager at DEC.
Great.
And I'm joined today by my colleague Kevin Burke, who's the Stormwater Program Manager. And I'm just gonna get connected to the Zoom
Okay.
so that I can share my screen. Oh, gotta get on the internet. For your patient.
Oh, yeah, no worries. You know, this is your first time in here, huh?
I joined you virtually earlier.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so you met.
happy to be here in
That's
person.
it. Great.
Thank you for having me. Looks like it's connecting to the Zoom meeting and I'm in.
We also have it.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Would you like me to share screen? Sure. Just try to make it. Awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for having us in this morning. Again, for the record, my name is Emily Bird. I'm the DEC Clean Water Initiative Program Manager, and I'm joined today by my colleague Kevin Burke, who's the Stormwater Program Manager. I understand you just had a walkthrough of H-481 with Michael O'Grady. And so we're just here to provide some additional summary of the bill and to share DEC's commentary on the bill. Before I dive into the specific components of the bill, I just want to share that DEC generally supports this bill as it's currently proposed. The 3-acre stormwater permit requirements remain a really critical component to the state's work and commitment to clean up Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog and to meet those phosphorus reduction requirements that are necessary to restore those water bodies. And it is a specific requirement under that U.S. Environmental Protection Agency approved and enforced total maximum daily load. And in addition to that, the 3-acre rule provides us with mechanisms to address stormwater impairments in some subwatersheds across the state as well. And that's a really important piece of being able to reduce stormwater flow to restore water quality for stormwater impaired waters. The bill contains some really valuable policy adjustments that can help to alleviate concerns over the cost of the program by adding time and creating some additional financial assistance and other levers that will help to support 3-acre sites in complying with the regulation. And we've been engaging with a number of stakeholders on this bill to try to find some options, some policy options to support this work, including Green Mountain Water Environment Association, Lake Champlain Committee, Vermont Association of Planning and Development Authorities, Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And each stakeholder brings a different perspective on the bill, and we certainly welcome their input and perspectives to make it a stronger and effective bill to support this body of work. And we also have a number of existing funding programs that we have launched in large part with a lot of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, or ARPA, that has become available. And so in addition to engaging with these stakeholders, we also engage a lot directly with 3-acre sites that are accessing funding through our existing programs and have integrated a lot of their feedback and perspectives into some of our policy positions. And some of those groups include manufactured housing communities and state agricultural fairgrounds. So with those general comments, I'm going to just walk through each section of the bill and provide a little bit of a summary on each section and some DEC commentary. And that's all organized in table format. I wish there was something I could do to make it a little bit bigger, but the Zoom bar across the top is kind of blocking.
Well, if we have it online.
You have it?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Let's see. All right, so the section 1 of the bill the first section of the bill involves advancing municipal authority to assess impact fees when a municipality assumes the full legal responsibility for a stormwater system. And DEC supports this change. We agree that this would streamline the ability of towns to assist their landowners in complying with the permit. And municipally sponsored projects have greater access to financial assistance through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and subsidy available through that. So taking on a private site under municipal responsibility would provide some additional options for financial assistance. A&R is neutral on the creation of new utilities and impact fees, but acknowledge that that could be an additional tool for raising revenue at the local level. And local impact fees for stormwater system users, we wanted to note if that's addressed at the municipal level and it's really focused on those stormwater systems. It doesn't really spread the cost of the 3-acre permit out geographically, but it does provide some additional options to spread those costs out over time, which may be helpful. All right, and moving on, another component of section 1 is amending the general permit timelines. And this extends the timeline for permit coverage, so that when we say permit coverage, that involves doing the engineering and obtaining a permit. And typically there's about 5 years after permit coverage to construct. And so it extends the timeline for permit coverage for Lake Champlain, Lake Memphremagog, and stormwater impaired waters by 5 years from 2023 out to 2028. And then for the rest of the state, it would extend the permit coverage for all other watersheds from 2033 to 2038, or not later than 5 years after a binding stormwater specific pollution reduction target. So for example, in the Connecticut River watershed, we are part of a 5-state total maximum daily load for Long Island Sound, where nitrogen is the pollutant of concern. Right now, the state is part of that cleanup plan, but there isn't a Vermont specific target that addresses stormwater in developed lands. So what this would do is if in a point in time where we were to receive that specific target, then it would give us 5 years after that to establish a permit coverage timeline. So kind of tying it to that specific target is what the bill currently proposes. And we do support this section of the bill, having that additional time to come under permit coverage, especially in Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog and stormwater impaired waters. It gives all of these sites a little bit more breathing room to come into compliance with the permit. And it also gives us some additional time to really continue to roll out additional financial assistance programs to help these sites be successful. And the Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog total maximum daily loads, they are a 20-year implementation timeframe. So under this time extension, we would still be in compliance with that 20-year commitment to meet these targets. But it would just make the overall program more successful. Yeah.
So you mentioned this, the 5-state potential TMDL.
Yes,
Yes, can you just like say a little bit more about that? Because I think I know what you're talking about, but I just want to make sure.
Sure. So right now there is a total maximum daily load for the Long Island Sound where excess nitrogen is causing really low oxygen and dead zones in the sound. And Vermont is part of the land mass that flows into Long Island Sound through the Connecticut River. And so there is, for the upper basin states, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, there are specific waste load allocations and load allocations, basically nitrogen reduction targets, but they're very general. The waste load allocation targets wastewater treatment facilities, and the load allocation basically targets all of their land uses. And we don't yet have a Vermont specific one. It's a % reduction for those upper basin states. So if we in Vermont were to try to implement a specific reduction target for nitrogen for these developed land parcels, it would be a little bit difficult to tie it to a specific target because we don't yet have that. But there has been some work underway through a 5-state work group for Long Island Sound to revisit that TMDL and see where additional actions may be needed. Up to this point, a lot of those efforts have really focused on Connecticut and New York and less so on the upper basin states. And in Vermont in particular, we're doing a lot of work for clean water. And so there would likely be an opportunity to look at all the progress we've made and make the case, maybe we are already meeting those targets, maybe not, maybe there's a gap. And so there's a whole process that would need to play out before we have specific binding targets that we would want these 3-acre sites to upgrade to meet a particular standard. We'd want to make sure that there's good reason for that. So that's what I am referring to.
Yes, thank you.
Great,
Perfect.
thank you. That's a helpful question. Okay, so just the last point on this, by having this staggered approach, it is also really helpful. A lot of programmatic capacity, especially from Kevin's team, a lot of engineering capacity, contractor capacity, will be needed to roll out this whole program, the 3-acre work. And so maintaining the staggering of rolling out first the Lake Champlain, Lake Memphremagog stormwater impaired watersheds, and then having that 10-year stagger for the rest of the state would be really important in terms of the feasibility and capacity to roll out this program. So I just wanted to add that as well in terms of supporting the extended timeline. Okay, sections 2 through 5 of the proposed bill on pages 4 through 6. There's a lot of language here. Special thanks to General Counsel for being able to piece all of this together, but a number of changes to be able to repeal the sunset of the property transfer tax clean water surcharge. And we are very much in support of repealing the sunset on the surcharge. This is a really critical component of the state's clean water fund. And it's the original funding stream that was put into the fund when it was first established. It has provided a lot of stability for the work we do in the state of Vermont, which is especially important right now, given the federal funding uncertainty. And I also just wanted to highlight that in statute under 10 VSA section 1387, the state of Vermont has made a commitment in statute to fund the Clean Water Initiative at $50 to $60 million a year. And that is to ensure the maintenance of effort for all of the clean water programs that we have been launching. And so the property transfer tax clean water surcharge is a really critical piece of being able to meet that statutory target.
How big is that?
It's roughly $8 million a year. Although the performance of it has fluctuated over time, depending on economic factors. Especially coming toward the end of the pandemic when Vermont was a really popular place. A lot of folks were moving to Vermont. The cost of real estate had gone up. We saw an increase in revenue there, but we're also cautious that some of those post-pandemic booms in the economy might be leveling out. So I would say $5 to $8 million a year is a good estimate for that. Thank you. Okay, moving on, the next section of the bill on pages 6 through 8 makes some updates to the Developed Lands Implementation Grant Program and the Municipal Stormwater Implementation Grant Program. So these two programs were established in statute as part of Act 76 of 2019. Act 76 of 2019, it updated the manner in which the Clean Water Board prioritizes funding from the Clean Water Fund through the Clean Water Budget process, and it established specific grant programs that those funds would flow to. So those 4 new grant programs were the Water Quality Restoration Formula grants to clean water service providers. That targets non-regulatory projects, so projects not compelled by a regulation, they're voluntary. It also established the Water Quality Enhancement Grant Program, which is available statewide to support water quality projects that are mainly non-regulatory and provide resilience, watershed resilience, in addition to water quality benefits. And then it also established these 2 grant programs that really target stormwater regulation. So the Developed Lands Implementation Grant Program, it's focused on mainly the 3-acre general permit to support non-municipal sites, so private sites. And it also established the Municipal Stormwater Implementation Grant Program, which is a little bit broader in its charge, but it supports all municipal stormwater regulations. So it includes municipal roads general permit, the 3-acre permit, and the municipal separate storm sewer system or MS4 permit. And so through the clean water budget, we have some sub-grant programs that each support those different regulations. And so this bill really is looking at updating some of the language related to the 3-acre general permit and how we support both municipal and private sites in providing financial assistance. And some of the changes that were made there is, first, it updates the name of these programs. It strikes out grant because in practice, there's a lot of different funding mechanisms that we are using. It's a mix of grants, contracts, and loans to support this body of work. So striking out the grant just gives it a little bit more of an accurate of a name. And it also, right now, the way it exists in statute is that the clean water service providers that are operating under the water quality restoration formula grants, where they're working to meet non-regulatory phosphorus reduction targets, if they're not making adequate progress, it could affect the availability of these funds for the regulatory programs. So the bill proposes to strike out that conditionality, and we do support that as well, because we want to make sure that to the best of our ability, all sectors are able to make forward progress. And if there's challenges making progress in one sector, it doesn't unnecessarily hinder progress in another sector. So we do support that change as well. The other piece is it makes financial assistance available to sub 3-acre sites that are required to retrofit to meet modern standards. So there are most of the work where we're retrofitting to treat existing impervious surfaces, that has a net water quality benefit. So we really target our financial assistance to those retrofit cases. A lot of most of the sites that applies to are 3-acre sites, but there are some sites that are smaller sites, and they still need to retrofit to meet modern standards. And Kevin can speak to this a little bit more if I may, if there's anything you'd like to add just to define that universe of sites.
Yeah, Kevin Burke, Stormwater Program Manager for the record.
Just, can we hold up for 1 second? So we have a question right here, and then we'll come right for taxi.
Well, that's okay, you might answer it and. if
Okay.
not, Then I'll ask.
Sure,
it.
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there are sub 3 acre sites that are identified in some of the either municipal flow restoration plans or there are some, you know, for example, in Killington, Roaring Brook, that need to do those upgrades in order to meet those flow restoration goals for stormwater repaired watersheds. Stormwater repaired watersheds is a flow target as opposed to phosphorus reduction target. But an example site would be one that was in Chittenden County that was sub 3 acre, but they were doing an engineering feasibility analysis that would require them to do exactly the same evaluation as a 3 acre site, but they had no ability to access those ARPA funds because they were so prescriptive to 3 acre, even though this small subset of projects, you know, we're really doing the same type of work.
That's been quite a question, so thank you.
Okay, but thank you, that was
Yeah.
helpful, it was just a different. This might be a naive question, because this is a pretty new area to me, but does some of the work that you all do actually reduce, Mike O'Grady was like, one of the things you can do is reduce the number of the amount of impervious surfaces, and that helps you meet the requirements. So, I mean, my naive brain is like, well, can you just rip out some of that pavement and then you're not at 3 acres?
Mhm.
Does some of the funding help do that kind of thing? Like plant more trees, do all the, like,
Yeah,
things like that?
so maybe in 2 parts, and Kevin, feel free to add to this, but if you are just on the cusp of being a 3 acre site, you can remove some of that impervious surface to fall under that threshold. And then you wouldn't be required to comply with the 3 acre permit, you'd be taken out. Well, there may be other stormwater needs for the site, but that is one option. We are also the stormwater funding that we are providing financial assistance through is really tied to the standards in the stormwater management manual. And Kevin, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to some of the options for impervious disconnection and some alternative ways to meet the standard.
Sure. The 3 acre sites that are required to reduce phosphorus are essentially meeting what's called the redevelopment standard in the manual, and that's a lower standard than say for new development. You're capturing a portion of the 1 inch storm and treating it, and you'd be capturing that from a portion of your site, at least half. Another option is to treat some of it, but also reduce some combination of the two. So some, you know, depending on what the engineer finds when they look at a site, there might be opportunities to, you know, some gravel areas that are just really gravel for no particular reason. Some people can reduce impervious if they're on that cusp of 3 acres and just entirely get out of the permit. I am not aware that funding would support the work to actually remove the impervious and revegetate it. But the engineering that was put forth, you know, if an engineer is going forward with looking at the site and doing that analysis, that portion to kind of come to the conclusion as to what they can do, that has been supported.
Okay, it just seems like there are lots of parking lots that are way bigger than they have to be. Why do we have all these 8 million parking spaces? Or so just reducing the amount of asphalt, and I know that, but again, I know this is a naive question, but it seems to me that would be a good way to go in a lot of these places.
Yeah, that's a great question, thank you.
I just wanted to add that, you know, the 3 acre requirements would require a site to be in non-compliance with another permit condition such as Act 250. So there could be not necessarily very good reasons or certain reasons why a road width is the way it is, or the parking spaces are as many as they are. But if it's an option, they can pursue that.
Did we reduce the parking space requirements in the bill that we did last year?
I think it was S100, which was checked, I mean, kind of going forward, but like you said, John, is that right? Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, it was number of parking spaces per unit of housing.
Right.
Yeah, so it was, it might not affect like big shopping centers or something, but it's an interesting thought to consider, like how much. Parking might be required for, say, a shopping center.
Right.
I don't know much about that, so.
Yeah, I mean, you go to the mall and like half the parking lot is empty.
Yeah.
It's like, why do
Right,
this?
yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you so much. That's a really great flag, and would love to take that back internally and see how that fits into some of our policy around funding eligibility.
Yeah,
In addition to the financial assistance we have for regulatory assistance, we have also a number of funding programs that support non-regulatory projects. Planting tree buffers, restoring natural resources like wetland restoration, floodplain restoration. So we certainly try to promote those nature-based solutions as much as we can as well. Thank you.
Yeah, there's another question here, go ahead.
So do we have a kind of a traffic director for people that would be seeking these funds? Because I'll tell you, it seems to me that the further away from the flagpole, which being Montpelier, the municipalities are, the less they know about requirements. So, if we're gonna get municipalities to take care of it, then, are the RPCs involved in this? Where they can help to kind of direct them to funding and help identify, at one point, we couldn't find enough engineers. Because there are a shortage, so,
Yeah.
and everybody that I've talked to in Rutland County wants to fix the problem. They don't want to be a part of the problem, but they're also looking for help to do it, with someone like this might help them with.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. I think so what this proposes, also it hopefully will incentivize municipalities to take on some additional 3-acre sites by providing additional resources and potentially additional incentive payments to the municipality to be able to do that work. And so we think that could really help to fill a gap in terms of supporting these 3-acre sites. Municipalities have a lot more technical expertise to be able to manage infrastructure and to do the long-term operation and maintenance, but the capacity varies municipality to municipality. And so a big part of the solution would need to also be providing that technical assistance to those municipalities as part of this effort. And the later in the bill where there's a study committee, there will also be looking at a potential for a regional stormwater utility and how that could maybe help to provide some more geographic equity to support these sites and support municipalities in their region. And would definitely welcome the Regional Planning Commission perspective on how that could work. They have a lot of great experience and expertise in supporting municipalities in this space. So I think that's an excellent point. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, and this statutory edit, it also provides clarity that when a municipality assumes full legal responsibility for what would otherwise be considered a private site, that it would become considered a municipal site in terms of access to funding that's been prioritized to support municipalities, including access to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, but also this proposes to stand up some additional financial assistance for these sites. So we generally support this section of the bill. It provides a lot of clarity on the mix of the financial assistance mechanisms available, removing that conditionality that progress in one sector has to be made for these funds to be available. We support that. It also fills a gap in supporting those sub 3-acre sites that we've been hearing from sites that need some additional support. And we also appreciate that clarification about municipalities being able to take on full responsibility for those sites, and that then they would then be able to access financial assistance. So that moving on to section 7, this updates the Clean Water Board's statutory priorities. So in statute, I had mentioned Act 76 of 2019. That was somewhat recent, I guess not anymore, but an update to how the Clean Water Board prioritizes funding in the clean water budget. And there are some specific prioritization tiers and the manner in which they allocate those funds. So this would update the board's statutory priorities to recommend at least $1 million annually would go to the municipal stormwater implementation program to support the cost of complying with the 3-acre general permit. So it doesn't limit the amount of money that would go there, but it sets a floor. And we do support this, and it provides transparency and clarity that there would be a minimum amount of funds that would be going to support this need. Related to that, section 8,
Yes,
Just to, not that we can do about it, I'm not suggesting anything, but just to give a sense of the magnitude of the problem, is the 1 million a drop in the bucket?
it is yes, it is a drop in the bucket compared to the broader need. I will just add though that the programs we're planning to stand up to support most of the 3-acre work. We anticipate what we call a linked deposit financing program, which means that we are launching a financing program that helps reduce the cost of borrowing by reducing interest rates. But the more sufficiently that that program is funded, the more principal loan forgiveness could potentially be explored. And that could be prioritized based on need. So if there's really high need sites, or considering affordability, for example. So the next section of the bill where it talks about the $5 million investment, that will also give it a little bit of a boost. So I'll get into that in a moment, but I also just wanted to add that this linked deposit program that we are working to develop can also receive Clean Water State Revolving Fund resources. And so tied into this fund, we have Clean Water Fund as a regular seed funding into this, and then also the Clean Water State Revolving Fund that will expand the level of financial assistance that we can provide quite a bit. There would also be repayment back into that fund, and it could revolve and continue to provide support. And that builds on a pretty massive investment that has already been made into the sector, about $40 million going into this body of work through American Rescue Plan Act, which has really jump-started a lot of the work. It's provided hundreds of sites with support in terms of the permit obtainment, the engineering and permit obtainment. And we also have special programs that we've launched to support public schools, manufactured housing communities, and agricultural fairgrounds with ARPA dollars. So we hope that whatever additional financial assistance comes, our plan is to try to, as best we can, continue those existing programs and that financial assistance.
Well, along, Senator Bonga's issue is that, you know, a lot of times, people that are in the know tend to get applications in for permits. Is there any way that DEC could prioritize maybe projects on the 3-acre list?
Yeah.
Or, and then have some kind of a link between you and the, you know, a lot of these are private landowners or business owners. That way they could be, you know, sure that they're gonna at least get considered for their funding.
Absolutely.
Some of them may not even be worth putting the money into, you know, maybe the engineers come back and say, nothing we can do, we don't have any place to put more water, so.
Yes, the engineering feasibility analysis that's baked into the permit program is really useful for looking at the site and what's feasible to achieve. And to your point about outreach to sites, making sure that they can access funding and supporting them in understanding the permit. One approach that's worked really well with the ARPA funding is to hire what we've called a funding program administrator. So for example, with Green Schools, we've contracted with an entity called Green Print, and they're able to support a lot of targeted outreach, public schools specifically. It's a unique sector within all of the 3-acre sites that has its own unique set of needs and manner of communication. And we're doing a similar approach with manufactured housing communities and also working with the ag agency to support the agricultural fairgrounds. And what that means is they can do targeted outreach to those sites and provide them with technical assistance in how to navigate the permitting process. And they do all of the subcontracting of engineers or construction firms on their behalf. So it really provides all of that hand-holding support. And so we're really interested in looking at for those high need sectors of sites, like just direct funding to the site might not be the solution. In some cases, having some intermediary who can do all of that handholding and technical assistance can be really effective. So I appreciate your point about looking at all those different needs. Thank you. Thank you. Section 8 of the bill, building on the $1 million per year, it proposes to initially appropriate $5 million in state fiscal year 2027 to this municipal stormwater implementation program for costs associated with the 3-acre permit. And so while it would be $1 million every year thereafter, an initial $5 million investment would give us some good capital to really jumpstart some of the financial assistance and financing options. So we do support that. We do support that investment. It's written in a manner that it would direct the board to recommend that initial appropriation of $5 million, but ultimately that would be a case for business of the legislature next year when when you all are reviewing the state fiscal year 2027 budget. And this initial $5 million will really jumpstart the financial assistance and loan programs that are under development and provide that additional capital to make it easier to provide lower cost borrowing for and potentially some principal subsidy. We also support the earlier draft of this bill proposed that appropriation to happen in as early as the current fiscal year. And so we really do appreciate that this would go into effect in state fiscal year 2027. We will be building our state fiscal year 2027 budget recommendation this summer. So it gives us time to plan for how we would reprioritize funding across the budget and minimize the impact to other programs versus trying to do that a little bit earlier would make it a little bit difficult to be really strategic with how we reprioritize funds to support this need. And then finally, section 10 of the bill, I'd like to comment on the study committee for the creation of a regional stormwater utility. It looks at some options to expand some of the what is in the bill currently is providing that financial incentive for municipalities to take on full responsibility for these 3-acre sites. This would allow us to explore how that could potentially be done at a more regional scale. And we do support that and think that the study committee really provides us with the additional time necessary to really unpack these really important policy questions that will support the whole 3-acre permit and allow us to meet those targets at a more regional scale. There's been some exciting discussion about how a regional approach for meeting the regulations may involve exploring more cost-effective and equitable solutions for meeting pollution reductions potentially off-site. So we are supportive of exploring that. A number of stakeholders involved in the process, of course, that we would need to get input from, but the study committee has a nice diverse makeup, which will make that possible. And also just flagging that municipal support for 3-acre sites may vary geographically. And so having a regional entity in place could help to make sure that based on the town you're located in, you don't get different levels of financial assistance. And a regional stormwater utility may also be able to raise revenue more regionally rather than at town by town. So it could help to spread some of the costs of compliance for the 3-acre permit across a region, which would spread those costs out a little bit more.
Something that might be useful if we had county governments.
Just lead me to it, Anne.
On the makeup of the study committee, we would recommend the addition of a regional planning commission to serve on that study committee. We really welcome their perspective in regional matters. And so would recommend that. And we also have these clean water service provider entities that are working to meet our non-regulatory targets through the water quality restoration formula grants. And many of the clean water service providers are regional planning commissions. So in particular, having a regional planning commission that serves as a clean water service provider on the study committee, I think would be really valuable. And we also support a recommendation that we heard from the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Authorities, VAPTA. They reached out to us suggesting that the deadline for the study committee to report Right now it's January of 2017, or sorry, 2027. And moving that up to November of 2026 would be helpful to give a little bit of time for bill drafting that may be necessary for consideration by the legislature.
So those are your only two tweaks that you would recommend, the very end, the date and adding a number, otherwise you're supportive of the bill as it came over to us.
Yes, and DEC and a number of other stakeholders did a lot of work with the House Environment Committee. And so this bill is, we're very supportive of it. A lot of work has been done to get it to where it is now, and we really appreciate that. So yes, we are supportive of the bill and just have a minor tweak.
Don't mess it up.
Oh, no. In your hands.
I do have a couple of questions. This is great, thank you. I really appreciate this breakdown, super helpful.
Great.
So this, it feels like this is helping the financial issues that people are really feeling right now. I think that's probably the most pressing thing. But I do want to just raise this question, and I don't know that we're gonna be able to solve this, but I feel like it's something I want to understand and at least want to put on the table here. The people for whom this applies, it's folks that have 3 acres of impermeable surface at a certain time, and then I was hearing from some folks, and we're gonna take a lot of testimony from a lot of, people that there's a lot of folks that have something to say about this. And we'll certainly have we'll dedicate some time to hear from them. But one of the things that I feel like I was hearing is why am I included in this? It might have been something like they had they are part of a subdivision that might have been one parcel that had 3 acres of impermeable surface, and now it is multiple subdivisions. Can you speak to that at all? Well, let me back up. Let me say a little bit more about that. If somebody had a subdivision that was created prior to a certain date, maybe they wouldn't be caught in this. Is that accurate?
Sure, may I turn it over to Kevin to answer this?
Maybe this is
Yeah,
something
right
that
up.
I'm getting ahead of myself here. Maybe you're.
No, it's a great
Anyway.
No, that's a good question. So the 3 acre requirements cover, regardless of when the impervious was constructed,
Okay,
parcel of land or tract of land, if you will, with 3 or more acres of impervious surface. The other piece of that, it also covers, multiple parcel development.
okay,
When those parcels were linked previously by a stormwater permit in the past. So I think, Michael Lee mentioned that, probably 1978 is when discharge permits were starting to be issued. So we could have some developments from the 80s that were issued a discharge permit. Perhaps not much treatment, but collected catch basins, things like that. Where they have been linked by this old stormwater permit since that period of time. So if there is collectively